The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, was created to help those who could not afford to feed their families. But over time, it's become harder to do that good, even as it's turned into an important part of the larger industry that provides food to Americans of all income levels.
You need help, and we're going to help you. We don't ask for specific details. If you show a need, we're going to be there.
This may look like a lot of moving parts.
Watch your backs, everybody, please.
It's actually a well-oiled operation of volunteers at Feeding Westchester, sorting and packing food for their hungry neighbors.
In this space, we have a variety of things.
Tammy Wilson is at the helm.
You are Feeding Westchester.
Correct.
And most of us, I think of Westchester County as being relatively affluent.
Absolutely. So Westchester having need was a shocker to me. You know, even affluent counties have food insecurity, and food insecurity can look like anyone.
Wilson says SNAP can only get you so far. For most families, the program provides only enough food for the first 2 or 3 weeks in the month. After that, they turn to food banks for help. But people may be getting even less of the food they need with revisions to SNAP, hotly debated in the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, about to come into effect.
Cuts, waste, fraud, and abuse in government programs like SNAP and Medicaid.
Although the target of the program has always been helping Americans who can't afford food, the tens of billions of dollars it injects into the economy each year have wide-ranging impacts, spreading all the way from grocers.
It's our job to make sure that regardless of that person's budget, they can still get healthy, nutritious food.
To farmers.
If people eat food that benefits us that grow food, just being a farmer, being someone who grows food, I want to see everyone eat.
The journey of a SNAP dollar starts with families who use it to buy food from grocery stores. From the grocer, it's passed to suppliers and farmers, and to their employees, all of whom can then spend the money on all the things they need. All of this results in a multiplier effect. It's estimated that every dollar of SNAP spending generates about $1.50 in economic activity. Sally Lyons-Wyatt has been tracking SNAP spending for over a decade.
The SNAP shopper is pretty savvy, so they actually navigate to fit their needs. Food retailers, so grocery stores, are the largest share, but I will tell you, you can flip that and look at it differently, and it's which retailers depend on SNAP more than others, and it is dollar, and then some of the value channels and convenience that depend on SNAP.
What do we know about how the consumers use their SNAP dollars?
SNAP consumers have their own money because they have to be working, so they use this to supplement their own income to just try and get meals on the table or into the lunch bags or dinner served. SNAP consumers do make more trips to the stores than non-SNAP, and they also spend a bit more when they're on those trips. They're also more dependent on retail because it is more expensive to eat out these days. In fact, it costs 4.3 times more to eat out than it does to eat at home.
For every dollar spent at the grocery store, about 24 cents gets passed down to the farmers. Brian Cavey is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at CoBank, a lender to rural America.
An area that I think not a lot of people are familiar with, and that is that food benefit ultimately is buying food in the grocery store. But I think that impact, that funding making its way back to the producer may not be on the minds of people when they look at the spending that goes into the nutrition programs. And those dollars have a rollover impact in the rural community.
But all of this is about to change. Grocery stores, farmers, and families are now bracing for the largest reductions in the SNAP program's history.
Welcome to where the magic happens. So before the pandemic, we were about 25,000 square feet. Now we're at a whopping 62,000 square feet. As you can see, we are prepared for what is coming. We're ready for space and people.
The One Big Beautiful Bill includes plans to shrink SNAP spending by more than $186 billion over the next decade. So now, food banks like Feeding Westchester are preparing for the fallout.
How big is your operation?
So food banking is about a pounds game, so we often will talk in pounds. We are a 21 million pound organization. Given everything that has changed, we are at a cusp. We believe that we're going to be, at some point over the next few years, a 40 to 50 million pound, if not more.
The effects of these reductions will ripple through the food ecosystem all the way to the plains of North Dakota, where farmers make up one of the highest proportions of the workforce of any U.S. state.
I take some to market in town directly during harvest, and some get stored out here, hoping for better market conditions. And then during the winter months, I haul my commodities to town. This family here was my father's, and then I do farm about 600 acres that's on my mother's side.
Family farmers like Tyler Stafflin and Matt Perdue have, for generations, made a living growing and selling commodities at the mercy of the market. Whether it's frigid winters or turbulent trade dynamics, they need help from programs in the U.S. Farm Bill, a wide-ranging package of legislation that gets rewritten by Congress about every 5 years.
The Farm Bill offers a safety net, essentially, for farmers. So when you have downturns like we are experiencing today, you can kind of count on that Farm Bill to keep you in operation. And hopefully I can pass my farm on to the next generation. A Farm Bill is a huge, crucial piece of that.
Roughly 80% of the Farm Bill is nutrition programs, mainly SNAP. Perdue is the president of the North Dakota Farmers Union. While farmers may not see SNAP cuts show up directly in their pocketbooks, Perdue says the indirect impact spells trouble.
60 years now, the Farm Bill has been a bill that supports the entire food system. And so that includes programs to support family farmers and ranchers and programs to support consumers. No more than 20% of the U.S. House of Representatives represents primarily rural districts. And so from a political pragmatism standpoint, it's really important that we have support from legislators who primarily represent urban interests, right? And their primary interest in the Farm Bill are the nutrition programs.
It's usually a broad group of folks that ranges from the general farm organizations to the commodity organizations to the conservation organizations, and then the nutritions and anti-poverty advocates. And those folks come together, and the result of that can be a bill that passes with wide bipartisan support and a very large margin. There have been efforts to try to divorce the food programs from the farm programs and push them independently, and that candidly is a recipe for both to fail. And we have food insecurity and poverty kind of spread out across the country, and it's actually a slightly higher percentage of folks that are both impoverished and food insecure in our rural areas than in our urban areas. And that's an important thing to consider, is that economic impact for those rural communities. And we have a lot of counties that are heavily dependent on this program. If you look at the top 100 or so counties across the country that are most heavily dependent on SNAP, the majority of those are not metro communities, but rather are counties that are more rural.
People in general are probably too proud to say that they have to, look for assistance in any way, shape, or form. So the closest grocery store to where we are today is about 30 miles away. So I'd say that that's a concern in rural America, especially rural North Dakota, is access to groceries.
For grocers and hungry families, the impact of SNAP cuts is not hard to imagine. They felt its effects during last November's government shutdown when the program's benefits got delayed.
You had a particular vantage point on what that stress on SNAP meant for food insecurity and for the people you supply. What did you find?
We found that the first thing is that people were mentally stressed, concerned. Some days they were really, really heavy. They were fearful, confused, some very angry, and just didn't know what was going to happen next. So a lot of our food pantries, our schools, we saw a huge increase in November, and it was leading into the holidays.
When there's a change, it's not just a policy change, it's about food security. As I say, it's about people putting food on the table that night. The education piece is really important.
Adam Kirk is the chief store operator of the Winn-Dixie Company, a regional supermarket chain in the South.
When it comes to making choices for that evening meal, it always starts with protein. And when we see funding suppression or we see price increases or cost increases in that area, that's where you notice it most in first. So that's where we react quickly to make sure that we are providing the very best value for our customers. We don't have control of policy change. We do have control over our purpose. And our purpose remains the same regardless of the policy. And that is to feed and enrich the communities that we serve. So we really work with our local communities and local nonprofits to make sure that we've got partnerships that exist for exactly these moments. So they're not on-off programs, we have always-on programs.
Perhaps there is one silver lining for U.S. food producers. Last year's budget legislation did increase funding for farmers, but it creates a potentially contentious backdrop as Congress negotiates a new farm bill this year.
The farm economy is in really tough shape. Most farmers are losing money every acre of crop that they plant and harvest. And so when we face some of the financial challenges we're facing right now, we're always going to advocate for improvements to the farm safety net, improvements to crop insurance. You know, I'm concerned that the perception of some folks who live in urban communities is that, you know, farmers and ranchers and folks out in rural America don't really care about, you know, our hungry neighbors, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. We need to get the Farm Bill done, and I think that requires us to bring the Farm Bill Coalition together. If we don't get that Farm Bill done, we won't have updates to farm loan programs at a time when farmers and ranchers are dealing with record debt loads. If we don't get that Farm Bill done, we're looking at, you know, not having the opportunity to improve rural development programs that support small communities, to improve conservation programs, where there's always opportunities to make those programs better. And so there is a lot at stake here.
So are we going to do some sorting here? Is that what we're doing?
Let's do it. Okay. Let's do it. I'm excited.
We may not know what's ahead, but one thing is certain. If we all do a little more good, it goes a long way for our communities to be well.